Before the world knew their name, this is what happened.
I'm a small kid from Akron, Ohio, a very small town outside of Cleveland, from a single parent household. I'm the only child. My mother didn't have absolutely nothing. She was walking around high school when she was 16 years old, and she was pregnant with me as a high school sophomore. So I'm really not supposed to be here.
But before those words, there was a different moment. Akron, Ohio, 1989. A 4-year-old boy sitting alone on the steps of a small apartment. The concrete was cold. The hallway smelled like last night's dinner. Someone was arguing 2 floors up. He wasn't listening. He was just waiting, like he always did. Waiting for the sound of footsteps on the stairs, waiting for the door to open, waiting for her to come home. She didn't come. Not that night. And that little boy learned something that no child should ever have to learn. That the people you love don't always come back. Who was he? And what does it take to leave the only person you ever loved and still find a way to become the greatest basketball player who ever lived? This is Before They Knew. And this is the story nobody tells. Stay with us. The man who said those words didn't say them as a child. He said them at the peak of everything he had built. 4 championships, billions of dollars, the greatest of all time. And he still called himself a small kid from Akron. Because that's where everything began. But before we tell you his name, we want you to remember something. There's a moment coming in this story when a 9-year-old kid had to make a decision that no child should ever have to make. Keep that in mind. His name was LeBron James. Drop a like if you're staying for this one. Trust me, you'll want to. But this isn't just a story about someone who escaped poverty. Those stories exist everywhere. This one is different because LeBron didn't just escape, he went back. And the question nobody asks when they tell his story is this: what creates a person who reaches the very top and still calls himself a small kid from Akron? To understand that, you need to go back to the beginning. LeBron Raymond James was born on December 30th, 1984, in Akron, Ohio, a city the rest of the world had mostly forgotten about. His mother, Gloria, was 16 years old, a high school sophomore, alone. His father was never in the picture. From the very first day, it was just the 2 of them, and Gloria had nothing. No money, no stability, no safety net. Just a teenage girl trying to figure out how to keep her son alive in the middle of a city that wasn't going to make it easy. They moved constantly, 7 times in a single year when LeBron was just 5 years old. Different apartments, different neighborhoods, different schools. The north side of Akron was not a forgiving place. Crime in the streets, violence around every corner. Poverty that didn't just touch the family, it surrounded them completely. And through all of it, Gloria tried. She worked. She struggled. She showed up every single day for her son. But there were nights when LeBron went to bed not knowing if his mother would be there when he woke up. All I cared about was her being home. That was the childhood of the greatest basketball player who ever lived. By the time LeBron was 8 years old, he had already missed more than 80 days of school in a single year. Not because he didn't want to go, but because the instability made everything impossible. New address, new school, new faces, over and over again. Gloria was doing everything she could, but everything she could wasn't enough to give her son what he needed most: stability. And then a man named Frank Walker entered their lives, a local football coach who saw something in LeBron, not the basketball player, the kid, the angry, lost, brilliant kid who needed somewhere to belong. Frank Walker made an offer that would change everything. Come live with us. Leave your mother's apartment. Leave the instability. Leave everything familiar, and come live with a family that can give you what you need to survive. LeBron was 9 years old, and he had to decide whether to leave the only person he had ever loved for the chance at a different life. Gloria said yes, because she loved him more than she loved having him close. And LeBron moved in with the Walker family, away from his mother, away from Akron's projects, into something that felt completely foreign: routine, meals, homework, stability, and a gym. In that gym, something happened. Not overnight, not dramatically, quietly. A 9-year-old kid who had spent his entire life moving from place to place found the one thing that never moved. The basket was always at the same height. The court was always the same size. The rules never changed. And for the first time in his life, he had something he could count on. He threw himself into it completely, not because someone told him to, not because he knew where it would lead, but because the court was the one place where none of the rest of it mattered. Not the missing father, not the empty refrigerator, not the nights wondering if his mother was okay. On the court, he was just a kid who was very, very good at something. And slowly, the world started to notice. By the time he was 13, college scouts were watching. By the time he was 16, national newspapers were calling him the chosen one. By the time he was 17, the entire country knew his name. But here's what nobody talks about. The kid who became the chosen one had spent years sleeping in someone else's house because his mother couldn't give him what he needed. What would you have done at 9 years old if someone asked you to leave the only person you had ever loved? In 2003, at 18 years old, LeBron James was selected first overall in the NBA draft by his hometown team, the Cleveland Cavaliers. And from that moment, everything the world had called impossible became inevitable. 4 MVP awards, 4 NBA championships, the all-time leading scorer in NBA history. But the numbers don't tell the whole story. Because LeBron didn't just win, he changed the game itself. The way basketball was played, the way athletes used their voice outside the arena. When the world told athletes to shut up and dribble, he refused. And then in 2023, LeBron and his son Bronny stepped onto the same NBA court, father and son, playing in the same league at the same time for the first time in the history of professional sports. The kid who grew up not knowing if his mother would be home when he woke up had built something nobody could take away. He went back to Akron and built a school, the I Promise School, for the kids who looked exactly like him. I wanted to provide the next generation with things I didn't have. And through all of it, he never forgot Gloria, the 16-year-old girl who had nothing, but chose to have him anyway. who moved 7 times in a year just to keep them together, who made the hardest decision a mother can make, letting her 9-year-old son go live with another family, because she loved him more than she needed to keep him close. LeBron has never stopped talking about her. In every speech, in every interview, in every moment where the world wanted to celebrate him, he pointed back to her. Without my mom, none of this exists. He bought her a house, not when he became famous, as soon as he could, because that was the promise he had made to himself in those Akron apartments, when he didn't know if she would be home when he woke up. He was going to make sure she never had to worry again. And every kid who walks through the doors of the I Promise school gets what LeBron never had: stability, support, someone who believes in them, because he knows better than anyone what a difference that makes.
There's a version of this story where he stays lost, where the missing father wins, where the empty refrigerator wins, where the 80 missed school days win, where a 9-year-old kid stays in that apartment and the world never finds out what he was capable of. That version almost happened more than once. But Gloria said yes when it mattered most, and LeBron said yes to the court when everything else said no. And that's what nobody tells you about the greatest of all time. It wasn't talent that made him. It was survival. The kind of survival that only comes from having nothing and deciding that nothing is not where the story ends. So if you're in your own Akron right now, if the instability feels permanent, if the people who should be there keep disappearing, remember a kid who moved 7 times before he was old enough to understand why, and still found a way to become exactly who he was supposed to be. That's the story of LeBron James. This is Before They Knew. See you next time.